All right, let's get started. A couple of business items. So with the funding plans, you're going to be identifying specific ways you're going to fund your organization. And today when we talk about earned income strategies, this is one. Think of all of your nonprofits and what's a way in which you could actually have earned income or generate revenue apart from fundraising. And most of you at first pass would say, oh, well, our model doesn't allow for, the good bar is for people who don't have a job, who want to get a job. So how could we have revenue generating aspect of it? But it could be if you meet at the poorhouse, you agree with the poorhouse, hey, can we have 10%? We're going to be bringing a lot of people in here and they're going to be buying coffee and pastries. Can we have 10% of the revenue that comes in, and then we'll promote the poorhouse and get more people to come? Or, so thinking of ways to incorporate revenue-generating aspects to your nonprofit. And Professor Al Lyons is going to be giving a lecture today on earned income, and he's an expert in this area and more largely in the field of social entrepreneurship. And I was just saying to him earlier that I feel like I do a disservice when we teach this class on nonprofit management because we're so tunnel vision on a nonprofit without thinking about the broader field of the social sector and social enterprise. And so each of us have organizations that have a social mission. How do we make it financially sustainable? And this idea with earned income strategies is a way to think about the sector in a way that's much more sustainable than just being beholden by government grants or funders of sorts. So I'm going to turn it over to Professor Lyons, and he'll share us more about earned income strategies.
Okay, thanks. Now there was enthusiastic applause, wasn't it? Anybody here been down to Global Gifts down the square? Okay, and I'm sure you're aware that's a nonprofit. Why is it nonprofit? Why is Global Gifts nonprofit and any other gallery or shop on the square or throughout Bloomington is?
For one, all of the people who work there are volunteers, except for 2 paid staff.
Did somebody volunteer to work in a store, in a grocery store? Having volunteers, does that make things nonprofit per se?
Because the way that they receive they have certain practices on how they intake their inventory. The inventory they're bringing in is supposed to be higher sustainability, and from what I've seen, and things like fair trade, that sort of thing.
But does that make it a nonprofit per se?
No, but it's part of their nonprofit mission.
It could be one part of the way they're expressing their mission, but couldn't a for-profit do the same thing?
Yeah.
At the end of the year, all their profit goes back into the business instead of just personal.
Okay, that's the basic, what makes something nonprofit. It means that there are no owners, and whatever profits left over goes back in. And because of that, they put a big emphasis on using volunteers. Is that an unfair business practice? Suppose you've got a store on the square, and you've got, artisans, Central and South America, that you have gone there, you've developed relationships, you said, hey, I'm going to carry your product, charge for them. Would they be unfair competition because, now they get to use volunteers, where I've got to pay my staff? Oh, they don't have to pay property taxes. I have to pay property taxes. They don't have to pay taxes on money that they make, goes back in the business. It's hard enough to make money in a business anyway, but that's where my profits go back in because I'm trying to invest and grow in the future and so on. But I have to pay taxes on that, and they don't. Well, this is the kind of thing we want to think about. We're going to talk about commercialization of the nonprofit sector and related to earned income. How would you define earned income?
I'd say income that is made in exchange for a good or service.
Income that's made out in the marketplace. Usually grants, contributions, and so on are considered unearned income. I've been involved with an awful lot of nonprofits over the years and spent a lot of time and effort trying to get grants and contributions. Thinking about it as unearned is a little bit odd. But regardless, that's kind of how they're categorized. So we're talking about what's in the marketplace. Can you think of any commercial business that could not be a nonprofit? Pretty much anything you can think of could be a nonprofit. Could be organized in whatever way, whatever criteria. Say this has got a public benefit, we are not distributing income, and so on. Now the good news for nonprofits is this means that when organizations are looking for money, and most nonprofits are always looking for money, we've got the entire marketplace we could use. You go to investment banking and you set up as a nonprofit, go for it. Want to set up a hardware store as a nonprofit because you think, hey, you own a hardware store, we can make some money at that, and then that's going to help our mission, go for it. And so I think that's what I want to try to emphasize. You know, for nonprofits, is it true that money makes the world go round? And it does. You know, you may like it or not, doesn't matter. That's how the world works. We exist in a market-based society. When a nonprofit budget is set up, typically the way it's done, here's the services we want to provide, what's going to cost to provide those services. We come up with an expense line, and then we say, now, how can we generate money, enough money to cover our expenses? 9 times out of 10, and that's probably low, that's how a budget for nonprofits develop. In for-profits, it's the reverse. First, they look at where is the revenue opportunity. If there's not a revenue opportunity and profit opportunity out there, why start a new business? And then once you say, here's the revenue that's available, now what do we need to spend in order to get that? So it's flipped. And I would suggest there's absolutely no reason why a nonprofit can't do the same thing. Why can't a nonprofit figure out how to maximize their revenue and maximize profits? And what if more and more nonprofits did that? What that would mean is we have more and more and more resources available to deal with some of the more difficult social issues we face as a society. So, if we're looking at that, and here's a program that deals with not only finding homes for stray animals, but also taking care of them, gives them support, a lot like a combination of the Humane Society and Pets Alive here in town. It's about a $5 million business, and over $4 million comes from program expenses. We have 3 dogs. The last one we had, first 2 that had, we all were neutered. The first 2, my wife took to a vet. Last one, she took to Pets Alive for one reason. It was half the price of going to vet. Yeah, that's a big revenue, and because they're able to get veterinarians working on a volunteer basis and so on, it does go back to, is that unfair competition? But conversely, for Pets Alive, those kinds of transactions are profitable. 85% of all the money they bring in. So let's think about this way. Each one of you is part of a group that's got a new nonprofit, right? What if your new nonprofit was a for-profit? If we've established that any business you can think of could be a nonprofit, it also means any cause and mission that a nonprofit has could be fulfilled by a for-profit, right? It just depends on how you want to organize your business. So let's say that you've been organized as a for-profit, but you have the same mission. Would it change what you do, or would it change how you're organized? Do you happen to be sitting close to others in your groups? I want you to take a couple minutes. How would you answer this for your nonprofit project? If you were organized not as a nonprofit, but as a for-profit, would that make any difference? Would it change anything? And what would it change? Okay? The group got an answer they came up with.
So, just background for you, we're a music marketing business,
Okay.
a musician marketing nonprofit, and we would not change at all. We would just charge people like a full cost for marketing services instead of asking for donations from like local businesses and stuff to like donate their services. We would just pay them, and that would be because the musician would pay us.
Okay. Excellent. Hold on to that idea. That's an important one in all kinds of ways. So, okay, good. Who else?
We are a music access program providing access to arts in inner city Indianapolis. And we would increase our permanent staff in order to provide a greater depth of access. So if we have more people working there.
So you feel that if you were a for-profit, you could generate more funding so you could afford more staff, is that
Yes.
right? Excellent. Yeah, hold on to that one too. Who else?
Okay, so our nonprofit builds schools in Nicaragua. And so we said that, well, like, schools usually are like nonprofits unless it's like a private school kind of. And so we were just like talking about like if we charge people like per class that they took.
Okay, so it might change that part of it. It's interesting when you would say that a nonprofit, unless they're private schools, and how we look at nonprofit schools and education in this country is the private ones are the ones that are nonprofit in a lot of cases. So, anyway, good. One more.
We're a music education program that uses like schools as our facility to go in for after school to teach piano. And so we said if we were for profit, we'd be able to buy our own facility and have them come to us. And then that way we could provide our own equipment as well, like instruments, rather than asking for them to be donated.
Okay, so there's an assumption that you're going to make more money as a for-profit. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Why couldn't you do that as a nonprofit?
Well, we would use schools as like a place to be, to not only save money, but then kind of like facilitate the students. So it'd be, like if it would be a school that didn't have an arts program, we could go to them. But then this way we could reach to a bigger like audience or bigger place that they could come to instead, rather than just focusing on the school that we were able to get into.
Although it's possible also to shrink that just because you are going to the students, which is actually a pretty positive business strategy. So keep these kind of things in mind. Here's another example. We'll go to Evergreen Life Services, which is providing services for seniors in a whole variety of ways. It's like a $10 million a year operation. Well over $9 million comes in from earned income. Why do we look at this? Nonprofits get contributions and grants, right? Who thinks that nonprofits don't get most of their money from contributions and grants? Could be. A vast majority of all the revenue for nonprofits comes from earned income. Far beyond what comes in from contributions, far beyond what comes in from grants. And that's one of the reasons that this organization, serving seniors, brings in $9 million out of $10 million of revenue from program expenses. Where's that coming from?
Is it from the members?
It could be from the members, most of it isn't. Medicare. When we look at the vast majority of the Medicare bill that's coming from the government is an insurance program. And it's booked as program expenses and earned revenue. As is Medicaid, interestingly enough, which is for the poor. Healthcare being overwhelmingly part of this. That's one of the reasons that they got that high program expense. Stone Belt receives a vast majority of its funding from Medicaid. So anytime they change the Medicaid regulations, Stone Belt scrambles as far as its own budgetary situation. That's all earned income. You look at their 990s and earned income programming services, it's a high percentage. We wouldn't think that, so be aware of it. By the way, this could be for-profit and they'd still get that same. Medicare pays, no matter whether it's for-profit or non-profit, it follows the consumer. So, should nonprofits seek profits? Is there anything ethically wrong with seeking revenue from the marketplace? I mean, there have been accusations periodically, about every 3 to 4 years, some comes up downtown Bloomington with some businesses declaring that, well, this is unfair competition and should not be allowed to be a nonprofit. They get no contributions. The only time that they seek contributions is when they open up a new store someplace. Beyond that, it's completely revenue generated. Is there something unethical about nonprofits going to the marketplace and competing with for-profits? Is it fair?
I was gonna say, I think it's completely fine for them to seek revenue. They aren't using it for like their own personal benefit, and they're like only using that money to further their organization and like continue like growing closer to their mission.
Okay. Well, keep in mind, there are people out there that, no, that's not what nonprofits do, without realizing that nonprofits do that all the time. Let's think about the larger nonprofits, unearned income, healthcare definitely because of insurance payments and Medicare and Medicaid, and the other big one is education. Harvard charges tuition as a nonprofit. Notre Dame charges pretty hefty tuition as far as a nonprofit. There's another organization called Living Goods. This is an interesting organization. It encourages micro-enterprise in third world countries with individuals in those countries, almost like on the same kind of model as Avon. There are products that are needed, you could sell them. Once you sell them, the individuals make profits. So starting almost small, a lot of small businesses. You look at they've got about a $2.5 million budget, almost all of it from contributions and none of it from program revenue, but the earned income is at the client level. And then they've got to deal with whatever taxes situation they would have in that country, whatever. Fees for services and goods from private services as far as public charities, 50%, half. plus fees for services and goods from the government sources, Medicare and Medicaid is another 23%. So we're talking almost 3/4 of all the revenue for the nonprofit sector coming from earned income. So this is why this is important. Private contributions, 12.9%, government grants, 9.2%, investment income. A lot of that's interest revenue that comes from endowments and major universities as an example, but there's the other investment revenue, and then some others. So if you put contributions to government grants together, you've only got 1 out of every $5 that's coming into the nonprofit sector. There's another reason for focusing on earned income, and that is that you've got earned income and unearned income. Unearned income, essentially two sources: private contributions, we also include business contributions and so on, and government grants. As we look to the future, 1.6 million nonprofits in the country today. The largest nonprofits are continually going out seeking greater and greater contributions. There are more nonprofits being formed every day in this country. But the amount of money that's going to be available for government grants probably is not going to change dramatically. I don't think anybody expects that, over the next 5 years, we're going to double the amount of money the government's giving to nonprofits. Probably not going to happen. Short term, probably going to go the other way. So if we're trying to get more money, the sector's not going to get more money from the government. So contributions. Hypothetically, everybody in this country could take everything they earn and give it away to charity. About 2% of our economy is given away to charity. First time they started tracking this was around 1960. And at that time, about 2% of the growth of our economy was that. First time we've ever started tracking at all kind of charitable deductions was back in 1919 with the implementation of the income tax, and at that time, about 2% of the growth. That basically, it's what economists call it's bounded. It's not limited. You could give away everything you make, but I think you give away about 2%. That hasn't changed. And yet the number of organizations out there is growing at a rapid rate. Especially the major entities are seeking more and more and more money. Take a look around campus. Lots of things, philanthropy at work. Also, just another side of that is that actually the number of households that give in this country is and has been steadily going down for the last 20 years. So, we're going to go raise more money. Possibly that's going to be a job. So if we've got more and more demands on the nonprofit sector, and we've got to get more and more funding for the nonprofit sector, the only place that there's more money is the marketplace. So a lot of nonprofits are going there because that's where the money is. Just like bank robber Willie Sutton. While you rob banks, that's where the money is. Earned income, that's where the money is. And so the whole viability of nonprofits could rest on their ability to compete in the marketplace. So what do you mean by commercialization of nonprofits? If we're more and more in the marketplace and we start acting more and more as nonprofits, start acting more and more as businesses, what do all the nonprofits do? Is there a problem?
I mean, aren't they very similar in terms of how they operate?
But keep in mind, nonprofits can seek donations and use volunteers. Would you go down and volunteer to work at the local bank? Probably not.
But can for-profits technically do the same thing?
Technically they could, but people don't. You could make a contribution to the bank. Gee, I don't think you're making enough money, here's some more money. Basically people don't.
So why is that a concern then if they're capable of doing the same thing?
That's the key question.
Aren't a lot of for-profit businesses, their insurance process and their government agreements don't let them have volunteers come in, whether it be you can't be there to participate because you're not covered under my insurance because you're not employed by me, or I have not verified any.
Would nonprofits fall into that same risk?
Well, nonprofits, it's going to be built into their insurance that they're going to have volunteers that they're assuming the risk of, or you're signing something saying.
But if a customer comes into the store and something happens,
But that's covered under a completely different policy.
it could be their insurance policies that can cover, do cover volunteers for nonprofits in all kinds of ways, for various reasons. And those insurance policies don't necessarily distinguish. You want a Habitat bill, you can get hurt. And so they've got that there. But it's a good thought. Here's the problem on commercialization, is that if you seem to be a business and act like a business, and you get profits like a business, and you operate like a business, then people are going to, why would I give money to this organization? Why would I volunteer for this organization if they are so much of a business? Why should the tax breaks apply to them? And hospitals have been under a lot of attack for a lot of years. 2/3 of the hospitals in this country are nonprofit, don't pay property taxes, and you've got some of the largest, most successful businesses in town.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel as though like the NFL also has this problem with just like people, even though it is a nonprofit, it seems as though like so many people see it as a business and like a big moneymaker.
Okay, good example, although they decided to stop being a nonprofit within the last year just
I
because
was
of the
gonna say, I thought,
hoopla.
yeah, they made a move to, yeah.
Right. The NHL though, the National Hockey League still is.
Still, okay.
And the LPGA, I think, is the other sports organization that still is a nonprofit. Keep in mind though, if you're running a nonprofit organization and you've got a strong earned income effort and commercialization and whatever, you've also got to make sure that people don't perceive it as, oh, you're just another business now. No, we still have that same social mission. And so from a nonprofit manager standpoint, it's important to be aware of that, okay, there could be a backlash if we go too far in this kind of direction. So, what earned income opportunities could you develop in your own groups? And there's two ways that you can do it. Think about your projects. What are the earned income opportunities you might have? Take a couple minutes. Okay, what ideas did you come up with?
Income from people that we provide services to. So the people that we market for, we can charge them for the flyers and just the merchandise that we use in order to promote them.
Instead of, we're going to not charge them or charge them a very low fee, we're going to charge them, at market rates. There's no reason why a nonprofit can't do that in the first place, too, as well as what you were just talking about. Good idea. In fact, this is a complaint from foundation executives where the pricing structure for services by nonprofits is actually often thought of, oh, whatever's the lowest we can charge, that's what everybody's going to pay. And why not do it on a sliding scale of some kind? Or everybody pays this and then you supplement that with a lot of scholarships, which is great stuff to raise money for and so on. So, there's sometimes just building and just taking exactly what you're doing and thinking about it as a for-profit can help expand that. Good. What else?
We said that we can't charge our patrons because it goes against the access, but the schools that we enter could pay a fee for us to come in and perform, and it could obviously be sliding scale based on where we were going. We could do merchandise because of the fact that it is such a kid-friendly thing, they're gonna want things.
Great. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, some good ideas. Here are some drawbacks. Once you go into the marketplace, you need to do a business plan. Got a class right now that's working on a program with a project that is a joint project between the South Central Community Action Program, which is where Head Start is, and so on, and Stone Belt, called Growing Opportunities. And they're doing hydroponic farming and using the clients of Stone Belt as far as tending it, but then they take those lettuce and cabbages and things that they've been growing and sell them. They're now at Lucky's, trying to get into Kroger, several restaurants, and so on. And one of the things they're looking to do is expand. They've got one greenhouse now on Stone Belt. They're looking to set up 2 others and possibly partner with 2 other types of organizations, job training kind of situations. And I've got a class right now that's working on developing a business plan for this, strictly as a business plan, and going through all the market analysis and so on, because we've got to compete in the marketplace. So it's time consuming. You have to educate board and staff and donors to think from a business perspective. Just some of the questions I'm trying to raise here start you get thinking about this from a business side. You've got to get your whole organization thinking this way. You need top quality management and pay. Growing Opportunities is up against big farming and other providers of produce that have top quality management and they pay them at that level. How do we have the same kind of expertise? You need upfront money and you need a cushion of cash. You've got to be able to invest, have enough money to invest, and then be able to manage cash flow fluctuations. A lot of nonprofits don't have that extra cash sitting around. And perceived as unfair competition with for-profit businesses. So these are drawbacks. There are benefits, there's no strings. Money is unrestricted. And this is something that could be a real problem with grants, and it can be with contributions, where there's only places that you can use this money. To give an example, I'm on the board of Middle Way House, by the way, and they went through a whole process of, there was a challenge from Jesse Eisenberg. He gave $100,000 to help retire the mortgage of the facility, which is great, and was able to raise $500,000 to do that. The problem is, we can only use that money to pay off the mortgage. The mortgage had about a cost of about between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. So paying off the mortgage only took care of our operating budget of about $40,000. Over the long term, it's going to be great. But it's not like we got $500,000. But the perception is, and we had to go to some of the donors who actually provide ongoing support, and now they've restricted their gift, and now we can't use it for other purposes. And so being aware, that's one of the reasons going in the marketplace is that money you can put any place that you need the money. It allows you not to rely on charity. It diversifies what you do. All of a sudden, if you're doing the school and you also start carrying some of the crafts and so on that are from there, now you've got a wider audience. You've got higher visibility for the school because people who might not be interested or aware of the school start being interested in your crafts and, oh, you also do a school, isn't that cool? And it improves your visibility and image. It forces you to focus on customers as well as your clients. What a drawback a lot of nonprofit leaders have. Oh, it's all about our mission. People will come to us because of our mission instead of what do people want, what do they need, which is actually how you get more contributions. When you start getting a market-based opportunities, you need to start focusing on how do we get customers to buy. And it starts making you much more aware of who those people are. You can get earned income from two places. One is it can be your core business. A hospital provides help for the sick and injured. People come in, they're covered by Medicare, you get support for that. That's their core business. Music education is your core business, so if you charge certain students higher rates or something like that, you haven't changed what you're doing, you're just making your core business profitable. And so that's one way to look at that. Is there a way to make our core business, what we do, profitable? Or it could be an add-on. Doing a crafts, selling crafts is not your primary, it's an add-on. One of the things that has happened, and this was prevalent probably about 10 years ago, we're seeing it less so now, is we saw a lot of nonprofits going, oh yeah, let's get into side businesses, which meant we're getting into businesses as a hobby. 4 out of 5 businesses, that's what they're focused on, don't succeed, don't last more than 5 years. So it's hard to start a new business, but to do it as a sideline is really difficult. And so what happened is you saw a lot of nonprofits getting into it, oh, here's a way to make more money. There's got to be a lot more money out there without, it's like, no, now we've got to get into the selling crafts business. In many parlances, this is what social enterprises are called, side business of a nonprofit. Can you think of another example?
Well, in Costa Rica, there's this place, it's like actually it's it's a business that operates more as a nonprofit. So it's a t-shirt printing company that employs at-risk youths, and the owners of the company then mentor this group of individuals so that they stay off the streets and pay for them to go get education.
Okay, although I would probably say that probably is the core business. I mean, it's a great example.
So Habitat for Humanity does like the restores?
Excellent.
Where
Yeah.
they just like sell donated furniture or plumbing.
Excellent example. Goodwill, same thing. And it's out there in the commercial world. And my wife goes to First Saturday at Goodwill, not because it's Goodwill, but because it gets incredible deals at half price. Anyway, so you might think about, does your basic enterprise that you're starting out, nonprofit, have a core business that you could make money off of that earned income from that business? Teaching the musicians and what do you charge and how do you figure that out is an ideal example of that. And then conversely, is there an add-on you can do that would complement what you're doing, expand your core mission that is outside of that? The other part of this is related income versus unrelated. So you start that store with crafts. But you're a nonprofit because you're providing educational facilities and so on. Selling crafts is not related to necessarily to what you're doing. Is there a problem? And this is where we get into unrelated business income tax. This is how the IRS has set up the tax laws to basically say if you're in a business that is not related to what you're doing, you do have to pay taxes on it. So for instance, you're an art museum and you have a shop. If that shop does not give discounts to members of the art museum, if it does not have things that relate directly to the art museum, it's just a gift shop. It's possible that's considered an unrelated business. Because it's not helping expand what the museum's doing, it's just there as another gift shop. So, a 501c3 organization generates unrelated business income tax when it recognizes net income, so you only have to pay for the net, but you have to pay for the profit, from a trade or business which is regularly carried on and which is not substantially related to the organization's exempt purpose. I can make a pretty good argument Restore is related to what happened at campus.
This nonprofit organization, which it's a school, I'm thinking like, can they partner with the art museum that's for profit? And since they're arts infused school, would that work?
Probably wouldn't go under unrelated business income tax just because it's related, even though it's a for-profit partnership, it's still related to their core, it's paying their core, to the thought. Keep in mind, if any of these, it needs to be regularly carried on, it needs to be not substantially related to the organization's exempt purpose. Okay? It also does not generate EBIT if it's performed by volunteers. It's there for the convenience of members, with a gift shop that's there, or a food service that's available in a museum, and it's there for the convenience of members. Merchandise is donated, or if there's sponsorships, and there's no particular benefit to the sponsor. Also would not generate EBIT. So here are some examples. Girl Scout cookies. I've heard all the arguments for, let's be honest, selling Girl Scout cookies has nothing to do with the mission of the Girl Scouts. It does provide about 50% of all the revenue for the Girl Scouts nationally. That's why it's done. Is it subject to unrelated business income tax?
They connect the Girl Scouts through entrepreneurship with women, that's why they're doing it, to teach.
So if your parents just sell their cookies, then it doesn't qualify.
That's true, but.
Let's be honest, selling Girl Scout cookies is not part of the mission of the movement. It's not subject to unrelated business income tax. Why?
Carried out by volunteers.
Carried out by volunteers. The other rationale is the last thing the IRS wants to do is come in and start taxing Girl Scout cookies. You thought people were up in arms about other stuff. How about the American Red Cross selling blood? Again, approximately half, that is dropping. Interestingly, there's less demand for blood. They're the #1 supplier for blood to hospitals and healthcare organizations across the country. Sell it at market rates. It's not why they were set up. It has nothing to do with supporting soldiers during wartime or disaster relief. It's a side business. So Claire Barton resigned when they decided to go into this. It's not what we're here to do. Why is it not EBIT? They collect blood all the time. So it is regularly carried and sell it all the time. So it's a regular part of it's an ongoing business. Why would it not be subject to EBIT? Partially, very much so. Blood is donated. Actually, when you think about it, it's a great business model. You get to sell stuff at market rates, and it doesn't cost you anything to get it in the first place. Whew. Indiana University has a golf course that's open to the public. Is that subject to EBIT?
Say that no, because they also use that for like the sports team to practice on, and they have like classes provided at the golf course.
Okay, interestingly enough, it's the reverse. It's yes, because it is also open to the public.
So like, what about like the hotel in the Union? Isn't that open to the public as well?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. That's a great observation. But also be aware, I was working with a nonprofit up in India a few years ago. Basically, it was tied to a master's program here that we had with students developing earned income opportunities. And as the CEO and executive director of that organization said, and if they come up something and we've got to pay EBIT and we make enough money, it's that successful, great, I'll pay it. You're just paying on the profit, so you basically, you say, oh, is this a real problem? You gotta stay away from it. Like, no, we want to make money, and, the taxes aren't that much. How about the All-State Sugar Bowl? You know all the bowl games are nonprofits. $675,000 a year, and they play one game. They don't even do a parade, It's just, there's the job. So, is the All-State Sugar Bowl subject to UBIT? It actually isn't. It really goes back to the sponsorship. All-State's above Sugar Bowl, and Outback, they just even removed anything else. It's just the Outback Bowl. And whether or not the sponsorship doesn't convey any tangible benefits. But they don't get anything more than just their name on it. They don't have any other considerations. Kind of just wrapping up. You're well aware of merging of the sectors. We've got a whole aspect of merging business management, nonprofit management, social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, and so on. And so one of the things as far as this whole area of earned income is, first of all, be well aware, for-profits, businesses, are definitely moving into the social benefit area. This is what nonprofits do. In fact, many for-profits have stronger social missions as mission statements than nonprofits do. And a lot of them are very sincere. Biggest charitable entity that's been set up in recent memory is by Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't set up a foundation. He set it up as an LLC because he wanted to maintain control on it. Bill and Melinda Gates set theirs up. They went back to the 19th century example of Andrew Carnegie, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the same thing Carnegie and Rockefeller and Ford and all those did in the 19th century and set up those kinds of foundations. So this whole blurring gets into where we get into social entrepreneurship. So social entrepreneurship is one of those areas that's kind of captured people's imagination. I was involved helping set up the graduate certificate program here.
Being on a board and with your experience, do you find more people that are against commercialization or that are for it?
I would say I find more people who don't even think about it. Quick thing, going back to Middle Way House, and I've been on the board. The Middle Way House initially did get into this area, and they started adopting the construction business. And when they started doing that in the mid-2000s, there was no other business like that. They basically said, we want to start a business that we can help provide job training for our clients that also make money. And there was they did extensive research of, okay, we're starting a new business, what business should it be in, which is very much what anybody who wants to start a new business does, and found this whole area of document destruction. And unfortunately, they didn't really have the capital to really work on an ongoing basis. But there was a market there, which about 3 years later, a couple of big companies out of Indianapolis realized, hey, there's a market down there, and they started moving in, and all of a sudden, Middle House could compete. So then they added a second one, social enterprise, which was FoodWorks. They had catering, and then they moved into a new building, and they actually had an area where you could actually come in as a cafe and so on. And it didn't work primarily because they were doing this side business. It was a part-time type of thing. They weren't giving full attention. Food business is tough. It's tough to make money in the food business. So I'm kind of working away at it. But no, they're not thinking that way. Because a lot of times people on boards aren't coming from that kind of perspective. All area of social entrepreneurship, I would maintain, is a way to think about fulfilling a mission. It can be done by a for-profit, can be done by a nonprofit, can be done by an individual, and so on. And here are 6 criteria. First of all, it identifies an unsolved social problem. It's something that hasn't been solved. Maybe you're trying to be addressed, but it's not solved. Poverty. We have not solved poverty. Then it looks for, what's the root cause? What's the cause of poverty? Let's not treat the symptom, let's treat the cause. It is innovative. It's got to be because it's an unsolved problem. You're going to try to solve an unsolved problem. You can't just do what others have done. It's got to be socially profitable, measurable. Oh, we're doing good. How do you know? How are you measuring that? It needs to be financially profitable. There's that sustainability, as well as that's where the profits are to be able to grow. If you've got an answer to an unsolved social problem and you solve it in Bloomington, now can we take that to the rest of Indiana, to the rest of the country, and so on? And basically, this is what they talk about as far as broad social impact. This I used in a presentation last fall to the Colorado Nonprofit Alliance on basically nonprofit leaders thinking like social entrepreneurs and thinking through what you're doing. And I would just offer, take a look at what you set up as far as your new nonprofits. How can you answer those questions? And by the way, if you can get that. There are people out there wanting to help solve these kinds of problems. And so this whole area of earned income morphs very quickly into for-profits and morphs very quickly into this area of social entrepreneurship. And I feel this is one of the keys to the future. Thank you all very much.